Something unusual is happening inside Iraq's currency system, and if you follow the Iraqi dinar closely, this is one of those developments that deserves careful attention. Because while the official exchange rate of the dinar appears stable on paper, the reality inside the country tells a more complicated story. A growing gap between the official rate and the unofficial market rate has once again become a central topic among economists, policymakers, and currency watchers. And understanding what this gap really means could reveal a lot about the direction Iraq's financial system is heading. Welcome back to Iraqi Dinar News, where we focus on the real economic forces shaping Iraq's currency. If you want to stay informed about developments affecting the dinar, Iraq's banking system, and the broader economy, make sure you're subscribed and following along closely, because the situation continues to evolve. Right now, the issue drawing attention is the unofficial or parallel exchange rate of the Iraqi dinar. Iraq officially maintains a managed exchange rate system controlled by the Central Bank of Iraq. Under this system, the government sets an official rate that banks and financial institutions are supposed to follow for international transactions. This official rate is maintained through foreign currency reserves, monetary policy tools, and a regulated system that supplies US dollars to the market. But in many countries with managed exchange rate systems, a second market often develops outside the formal banking sector. This is commonly known as the parallel market or the street market. In that market, currency is exchanged based purely on supply and demand rather than official policy, and in Iraq right now, that parallel market is showing signs of pressure. When analysts say the unofficial rate is elevated, they are referring to the number of Iraqi dinars required to purchase $1. The higher that number becomes, the weaker the dinar appears in the unofficial market. This difference between the official rate and the street rate may seem like a technical detail at first, but in reality it can reveal important information about the health of a country's financial system. When the gap between these two rates becomes large, it usually means that demand for dollars inside the economy is stronger than the supply being provided through official channels. In simple terms, more businesses and individuals are trying to obtain dollars than the formal banking system is currently able to distribute quickly and efficiently. Iraq's economy provides several reasons why that pressure can emerge. One of the biggest is the country's heavy reliance on imports. Iraq imports a significant portion of its consumer goods, food products, machinery, construction materials, and technology. All of those imports must be paid for in foreign currency, usually US dollars. That means Iraqi businesses constantly need access to dollars in order to maintain supply chains and keep goods flowing into the country. When the official banking system provides those dollars smoothly, the exchange rate remains relatively stable. But if access becomes slower, more regulated, or temporarily restricted due to compliance procedures, businesses may begin looking for alternative ways to obtain foreign currency. That is where the parallel market becomes active. Over the past few years, Iraq has introduced a number of financial reforms aimed at increasing transparency in international transactions. These reforms are closely connected to global banking standards and anti-money laundering regulations. The goal is to ensure that cross-border payments follow internationally accepted compliance procedures. While these reforms are important for strengthening Iraq's financial credibility globally, they can also create short-term friction within the domestic economy. When banks tighten verification procedures or require more documentation for dollar transfers, some businesses experience delays in obtaining the foreign currency they need for trade. Those delays can push additional demand toward the unofficial market. Once that demand enters the parallel market, prices are determined purely by supply and demand. If many buyers are chasing limited dollars, the price of the dollar rises relative to the dinar. That means the dinar appears weaker in the unofficial market even if the official government rate has not changed. For ordinary citizens, this situation can have noticeable effects. A weaker dinar in the street market often leads to higher prices for imported goods. Since Iraq depends heavily on imported products for daily consumption, fluctuations in exchange rates can feed into domestic inflation. Importers who purchase dollars at higher rates must pass those costs through the supply chain, and consumers may eventually feel the impact through rising prices in markets and stores. This is exactly why Iraqi monetary authorities monitor the gap between the official and unofficial exchange rates so closely. Maintaining confidence in the national currency is one of the most important responsibilities of any central bank. If the difference between the two rates becomes too large, it can signal deeper inefficiencies in how currency is being distributed through the financial system. The Central Bank of Iraq has several tools it can use to address this kind of situation. One of the most important is managing the supply of dollars through official banking channels. Iraq generates large amounts of foreign currency primarily through oil exports. Those oil revenues are converted into dollars and then distributed into the domestic economy through the banking system. By adjusting how those dollars are supplied to banks and importers, policymakers can attempt to balance supply and demand more effectively. If legitimate businesses can access foreign currency through regulated channels without unnecessary delays, the incentive to use the parallel market becomes smaller. Another important step involves strengthening the banking infrastructure itself. Iraq has been working to modernize its financial sector by introducing digital payment systems, improving electronic banking services, and expanding financial monitoring mechanisms. These efforts are designed to bring more economic activity into the formal banking system rather than leaving transactions in informal markets. Digital banking reforms, improved compliance systems, and better transparency in financial transactions all contribute to a stronger monetary framework over time. When businesses trust the official financial system and can conduct international payments efficiently, the role of unofficial currency markets tends to shrink. However, the broader economic structure also plays a major role in currency stability. Iraq remains heavily dependent on oil exports for the majority of its government revenue and foreign currency inflows. While oil generates substantial dollar income for the country, it also creates a narrow economic base. When an economy depends heavily on one export sector while importing many of its consumer goods, pressure on foreign currency demand can appear frequently. This is why economic diversification has become such an important topic in Iraq's long-term development strategy. Expanding sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, logistics, and domestic services could gradually reduce the country's dependence on imports. If more goods are produced domestically, the demand for foreign currency decreases, which in turn reduces pressure on the exchange rate. In addition, reforms aimed at strengthening private sector growth, improving investment laws, and modernizing financial institutions are all part of Iraq's broader effort to stabilize its economic system. These structural reforms may not produce immediate changes in the exchange rate, but they help create the conditions necessary for long-term currency stability. For those who follow the Iraqi dinar closely, it is important to view the current discussion around the parallel exchange rate within this larger economic context. Currency markets are influenced by a wide range of factors including trade flows, banking regulations, global financial conditions, and domestic economic policy. A temporary gap between official and unofficial rates does not automatically signal an imminent revaluation or a dramatic shift in currency policy. In many cases, it simply reflects short-term liquidity pressures or transitional adjustments as financial systems evolve. What matters most is how policymakers respond. If authorities successfully improve access to legitimate dollar channels, strengthen financial oversight, and continue modernizing the banking system, the gap between official and unofficial markets can gradually narrow. In the near term, Iraqi officials are likely focused on exactly that goal, stabilizing the exchange rate environment while continuing reforms that increase transparency and efficiency in the financial sector. Achieving that balance is critical not only for domestic economic stability, but also for maintaining confidence among international investors and financial institutions. Over the longer term, the future stability of the Iraqi dinar will depend on deeper structural improvements. Expanding the private sector, strengthening financial governance, improving infrastructure, and developing non-oil industries all play an essential role in building a resilient economy capable of supporting a stable national currency. It is also worth remembering that exchange rate management is rarely simple. Even advanced economies experience currency fluctuations and temporary market distortions when global conditions shift. The presence of a parallel market does not necessarily indicate failure, but rather highlights areas where financial systems are still adjusting and improving. For dinar observers, the key takeaway from the current situation is that the discussion around the unofficial exchange rate reflects ongoing adjustments inside Iraq's monetary system rather than providing a clear signal of immediate currency revaluation or a sudden policy shift. Exchange rate movements are shaped by many interconnected factors, and understanding those factors is essential for interpreting what the numbers truly mean. As Iraq continues to reform its banking sector, improve compliance with international financial standards, and modernize its economic infrastructure, these developments will remain important indicators to watch. Each step toward a more transparent and efficient financial system strengthens the long-term foundation of the Iraqi economy. For now, the story of the dinar is not defined by a single number on an exchange board, but by the broader reforms taking place behind the scenes. And those reforms, while gradual, play a critical role in shaping the future direction of Iraq's currency and financial stability. As always, staying informed through responsible analysis and verified economic information is the best way to understand developments surrounding the Iraqi dinar and Iraq's evolving financial landscape. And like all economic discussions, this update is intended for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as financial or investment advice.